So because it's Halloween, I decided to tell a little bit of a creepy story. My great-great-grandpa, Grandpa Kortkamp, was kind of a crazy little guy. He grew up in Alton, Illinois with my great-grandma, and they grew up in this small town where the population even now is 30,000 when Cache Valley is 110. So they grew up there, and every now and then they would have a bicker or a fight or they holler at each other, but nobody thought anything, was weird about it. And so they had 5 kids there, and then they decided to move to Wisconsin. And they took a train all the way up to Wisconsin and bought a farm for $12. So they had acres of all of this farmland of corn and spaghetti squash and tons of different vegetables. So when I was telling this story, when I wanted to get more information about it, I decided to call one of the grandkids, who would be my great uncle. And he described his grandpa as being a stern and angry man. He said that he always wore suspenders, and he had a flannel shirt and big boots, and he would sit in his chair and rock. He said if he wasn't on the farm, he would always just be sitting in that chair, rocking. But he said Grandma, on the other hand, was very nice. She would make them candy. She would make them candy, and then she would be able to work with them side by side in the farm fields. She said that she would always make sure that they were warm at night because they lived in this old barn house where they had no electricity, they had no indoor plumbing, so she would always make sure that they were happy. And she would always make them tons of baked goods, cakes, and cookies. Very sweet lady, I think. But she was also a very strong personality. She would always stick up for herself. So my uncle said that sometimes my grandpa would holler, "You didn't clean the floor! Look at this spot on my shirt!" Rock in his chair. She would always stick up for herself, no matter what happened. So, one day, my grandpa, when he was about 70 years old, just kind of lost it. My grandma was in the kitchen making breakfast, and my grandpa comes downstairs and creeps up behind her and just raises his shotgun and shoots her in the back, right in the shoulder. My grandpa ran back upstairs and just sat in his chair. My grandma, on the other hand, collapsed to the floor, bleeding profusely. She holds her shoulder and begs that she will be able to make it across the farm field to her brother's house. She runs out the door, but then falls to her feet, falls to her legs, and just prays, "Please, God, please let me be able to make it to my brother's house." So she's crawling across this cornfield, and she makes it all the way across the cornfield to her brother's house. And there at her brother's house, she calls one of her sons, Howard. She tells Howard what happens. Howard is flipping out. He drives all the way to there and opens the door and slams it open and says to his dad, "Dad, what did you do?" Grandpa's just sitting there. "I shot her." And for a second, Howard said that he looked like he felt sorry. But then again, it just glazed over and he became even more angry. Howard didn't know what to do, so they had to call the cops, obviously, and so they took him to the insane asylum. So my grandpa was only in the insane asylum for 2 weeks. And because my grandpa knew everybody in town, he was never arrested, he never went to court, or anything like that. So he gets out, and my grandma stayed with some family in California for quite some time, just to get away from everything. So, after that, Grandpa decided that he needed to apologize. After 2 years, they finally met up, and he apologized to her, and he says, "I'm sorry, I shot you." And she goes, "Well, why did you do it?" And then he starts hollering and yelling, and they had to drag them both out of the room again. So nobody ever really realized why he did it or what his motive was. But my grandpa lived until he was 100 years old, and my grandma only lived until she was 97. She died right before him.